Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are attempting to reconstruct a nightmare.
That's a good way to put it.
We're traveling to a location that, if you were to see it on a postcard or, a travel blog, it looks like absolute paradise.
Oh, completely.
We're talking about the Houtman Abrolhos Islands, specifically this tiny, flat sliver of coral off the coast of Western Australia called Beacon Island.
It is so deceptive, isn't it? You see the turquoise water, the pristine coral reefs, the white sand.
Yeah.
It looks like the kind of place you'd pay thousands of dollars to go and sip a cocktail. But historically, and certainly archaeologically, this place is known by a much heavier, much darker moniker.
Which is?
Batavia's Graveyard.
Right. And we aren't just talking about a shipwreck here. I think usually when we cover maritime history, the disaster is the ship hitting the rock.
That's the event.
The boat sinks, people drown, end of story. It's a tragedy, yes, but it's a singular event. The story of the Batavia is, well, it's different. The shipwreck was just the opening act.
Precisely. If we're looking at this strictly through the lens of a shipwreck, we miss the entire point. The Batavia struck Morning Reef in 1629. That's a fact. But the core of our discussion today, and the focus of all the source material we have in front of us, is what happened after the timber cracked.
Okay.
It's a story of a mutiny so brutal and a massacre so systematic that it feels less like history and more like a crime scene investigation that just happens to be almost 400 years old.
That's exactly the vibe I got from reading through these archaeological reports. We aren't just looking at history in the abstract. We are looking at a cold case.
A very cold case.
And we have a stack of sources here that are incredibly granular. We're talking archaeological excavation reports, forensic analysis of skeletal trauma, studies on isotopic data from teeth, even chemical analysis of soil.
It's forensic anthropology meeting maritime archaeology. So the mission of this deep dive is to really explore the excavations on Beacon Island to understand what lies under the sand. We want to move beyond the famous journal entries and look at the physical evidence.
The hard evidence.
Exactly. From the mystery of a black soil feature the archaeologists called the Blob to the specific chemical composition of the victim's teeth.
And we are going to try to reconstruct what the archaeologists called the living surface of the survivors' camp. Because for a few months since 1629, this tiny island was the stage for a psychological experiment just gone horribly wrong.
A total collapse of civilization.
So let's unpack this. Before we get to the digging, we have to understand what was wrecked. What was the Batavia?
To understand the Batavia, you really have to understand the Dutch East India Company, the VOC.
The VOC. I feel like we hear that acronym a lot in history, but give us the scale. How big are we talking?
Okay, think of Apple, Amazon, and Google combined.
Okay.
Then give them a private army, the power to mint their own currency, and the legal right to wage war and execute criminals.
Wow. So not just a company.
It was the first true multinational corporation. And the Batavia, built in Amsterdam in 1628, was a retour ship.
A retour ship. What does that mean?
It literally means a return ship. These weren't built for speed or elegance. They were built to be massive floating warehouses.
Okay.
Designed to haul heavy cargo out to the East Indies and then bring spices back. The Batavia was the flagship of the fleet. It was brand new. And it was loaded with incredible wealth. We're talking chests of silver coins, jewels, high-end trade goods.
And in the weird detail I found in the notes, a sandstone portico.
Yes, that's a favorite detail of mine.
So they were carrying a building.
Essentially, yeah. It was a giant prefabricated stone archway. It was intended to be the entrance gate for the castle in the city of Batavia, which is modern-day Jakarta.
So they're just carrying this city gate across the ocean.
They were using these massive stone blocks as ballast in the hold. It's a strange image, isn't it?
It really is.
Carrying a stone gateway across the ocean to build a city that barely existed yet.
But the most dangerous cargo wasn't the heavy stone or the silver. It was the people. One source called it a volatile human element.
And that is the absolute key. You have over 300 people crammed onto this ship. Sailors, soldiers, high-status passengers, women, children. And simmering underneath the surface was a plot.
Right.
Even before the ship wrecked, there were whispers of mutiny.
So the tension was already there. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark.
And then, on June 4, 1629, you get the spark. The Batavia strikes Morning Reef in the Wallaby group of the Abrolhos Islands.
Middle of the night.
Middle of the night, the ship slams into the coral. It's just chaos. About 40 people drown immediately as the ship starts to break apart. But that leaves over 200 survivors who managed to scramble off the wreck and onto the nearby islands.
And islands might be a generous term here, right?
Oh, very generous.
Yeah.
Beacon Island, where most of them ended up, is tiny. It's a coral cay. It's about 350 meters long.
So you could walk across it in a few minutes.
Easily. It's low elevation, so it's barely above sea level. And crucially, critically, for 200 people, it has no fresh water.
No water. That's a death sentence right there.
Immediate.
And this is where the leadership dynamic completely fails. The commander, Francisco Pelser, and the senior officers, they just leave.
This is a controversial point. Pelser, along with the ship skipper and some senior officers, took the only longboat.
The only one.
The only one. They claimed they were going to look for water on the mainland. They didn't find any. So they made a decision. They decided to sail the longboat to Jakarta to get help.
Wait, Jakarta is 3,000 kilometers away in an open boat.
It's an incredible feat of navigation.
Yeah.
Genuinely one of the greatest open boat journeys in maritime history. But from the perspective of the people left behind on the island.
It looks a lot like abandonment.
Desertion.
Yeah.
Exactly. Pelser leaves. And he leaves behind hundreds of thirsty, terrified people on a waterless rock. Leaderless. Or so they thought. Because this is where the vacuum is filled by one of the most terrifying figures in maritime history. Under Merchant Geronimus Cornelis.
Cornelis. Even the name sounds like a villain in a drama. But we need to pause on him, because the critique of the historical record suggests he wasn't just a thug. He wasn't a pirate in the traditional sense.
No, not at all. He was an intellectual. He was a pharmacist by trade, a man of high status.
So educated.
Very. But more importantly, he was a smooth talker, and he held some very dangerous beliefs. He was a follower of a painter named Terentius.
A painter.
A heretical painter. Terentius led this sect that believed in a specific brand of libertinism. The core idea was that all religions are essentially the same, and that if you are godlike or enlightened, sin does not apply to you.
Oh, that is a dangerous recipe. If I am enlightened, nothing I do is wrong.
Exactly. It's the ultimate narcissism. Cornelis believed he was above morality. He'd been plotting to hijack the Batavia for its silver before the crash. Now that the ship was wrecked and the commander was gone, he saw his opportunity. He took control of the survivors.
But he's stuck on a rock with no water? Even if he's the king of the island, he's the king of a graveyard. What was his endgame?
That's the audacity of the man. He wasn't planning to stay. He knew a rescue ship, probably Pelser, would eventually have to come for the silver. You don't lose the flagship of the VOC fleet without someone coming to look for the cash.
Makes sense.
Cornelis's plan was to wait for the rescue ship, hijack it, kill the rescuers, and then sail away to become a pirate in the Indian Ocean.
Okay, so hijack the rescue boat. But to do that, he has a logistical problem. He has 200 survivors.
Way too many.
That's too many mouths to feed and too many people who might fight back.
Correct. He needed to cull the herd. He had to reduce the numbers to prolong the water supply and eliminate any threats. But he was smart about it. He didn't just start hacking people to death immediately.
So how did he do it?
He groomed a group of young men soldiers, cadets, into his inner circle. He indoctrinated them with his Terentius philosophy. He made them feel special, powerful. He turned murder into a bonding ritual.
It's a cult.
It is absolutely a cult dynamic. And then the massacre began. Over the course of a few months, Cornelis and his followers systematically murdered approximately 125 men, women, and children.
And when we look at the sources, the methods are they're gruesome. We are talking drowning, strangulation, throat cutting.
It was a reign of terror. They would take people out on rafts, tie their hands, and just push them off. They would invite people for a council and then bludgeon them. Pelsert's journal, which he wrote after the fact based on interrogations, describes it in horror story detail. It became a bestseller in the 17th century.
Right, the unlucky voyage of the ship Batavia. But here's the thing about historical journals. They can be exaggerated. Pelsert had a reason to make himself look like the avenging hero, and Cornelis like a monster to cover up his own failure in losing the ship.
Sure, he's a biased source.
So for a long time, historians had the book, but they didn't have the body. In fact, for centuries, they didn't even know where the island was.
And that brings us to the rediscovery. This is where the story shifts from history to detective work. For centuries, the map was just wrong.
How can you lose an island?
Well, the charts in the 17th century weren't exactly GPS, but the real confusion set in around 1830. The HMS Beagle,
Darwin's Beagle?
the very same ship, surveyed the area. Due to some navigational errors, they identified the wreck site as being in the Pelsert group of islands, which is much further south.
So for over 100 years, treasure hunters, historians, everyone is looking in the wrong place.
In the Pilsert group, and they're finding nothing. It wasn't until the 1960s that a historian named Henrietta Drake Brockman cracked the code. And she didn't do it with sonar or satellite imagery. She did it by reading Pilsert's journal very, very carefully.
And she found something everyone else missed.
She noticed a biological clue.
This is the wallaby thing.
It is. In his journal, Pilsert described seeing cats on the islands. He wrote about these strange creatures that jumped and had a pouch under their belly.
Clearly not a cat.
Clearly a marsupial, specifically the Tamar wallaby. Now, Henrietta checked the zoological records. Tamar wallabies do not exist in the Pilsert group where everyone was looking. They only exist in the wallaby group further north.
That is brilliant. The animals pointed the way to the shipwreck.
Biology corrected history. She realized they were looking in the wrong island group entirely. This insight led to the rediscovery. In 1963, a lobster fisherman named Pop Martin was on Beacon Island in the wallaby group, digging a rubbish pit near his shack.
Just digging a hole for his trash.
Just digging a hole for kitchen scraps. And his shovel hit a human skull.
Wow.
That skeleton was designated M3901. That same year, largely thanks to Drake Brockman's theory, divers confirmed the wreck of the Batavia on Morning Reef nearby cannons, anchors, the works.
So Pop Martin hits a skull, and suddenly Beacon Island isn't just a fishing spot anymore, it's a crime scene.
And that kicked off the modern era of investigation. And this is where we really need to dive into the archaeology, because the outline mentions this concept of a living surface.
Right. Living surface. It sounds almost pleasant, but in this context, I'm assuming it's not.
No. A living surface in archaeology is the layer of soil that was the ground level at the time the events took place. It's where people walked, dropped things, ate, slept. When archaeologists excavate Beacon Island, they aren't just finding graves. They are peeling back the sand to reveal the daily life of this cult.
And what did daily life look like on Murder Island?
It was a bizarre, surreal mix of high-status European luxury and desperate animalistic scavenging.
So,
imagine this. You're on a desolate coral island, scorching sun, smell of rotting seaweed and guano, and scattered in the sand are fragments of beardman jugs.
Beardman jugs.
Also known as Bellarmine jugs. They were stoneware vessels, very common in the 17th century, used for transporting wine or spirits. They have a bearded face stamped onto the neck of the bottle.
A bit creepy.
A little bit. But on the island, these weren't for wine anymore. They were likely salvaged from the wreck to store precious rainwater. So you have these bearded ceramic faces staring back at you while you ration out drops of water.
It's a very specific, unsettling image.
And we see them trying to maintain some semblance of grooming. Archaeologists found ivory combs.
Like for their hair?
Double-sided ones. One side has wide teeth for combing hair. The other side has extremely fine teeth.
For lice.
Exactly. So even while people are being dragged off and throat cut in the night, during the day, they're sitting there picking lice out of their hair. They also found a barber surgeon's bowl. It speaks to this human need to maintain the routine of the body, even when the social contract is just evaporated.
And the contrast in the artifacts is wild. You mentioned amber beads.
Yes, likely from rosaries or trade jewelry, high value, but they were found right alongside butchered seal and wallaby ribs.
So diamonds in dinner.
It shows the total collapse of the value system. The cargo of the Batavia, the silver, the jewels, became meaningless compared to protein and fresh water.
Right.
If you're starving, a seal rib is worth more than a chest of silver. Although we should note that Pilsert's salvage team in 1629 was very thorough.
Right, because Pilsert does come back.
He does. And when he returns, his priority after executing the mutineers is recovering the company's assets. The sources say his team swept up every last thimble. So what the archaeologists are finding today is just the scraps that slipped through the cracks of that 17th century salvage operation.
But sometimes the scraps tell the best stories. Let's talk about the weapons, because Cornelis confiscated the official weapons, right?
He did. He locked up the muskets and swords to keep control. But the archaeologists found lead musket balls, about 1.45 centimeters in diameter, and they found evidence of improvised violence. On a nearby island, Long Island, which was used as a prison and execution site, they found a morning star.
That sounds medieval. Describe it for us.
It's a makeshift mace, a weapon of pure brutality. They took a piece of sheet lead, probably hull sheathing from the ship, and folded it over several times to make a heavy lump. Then they drove iron nails through it so the spikes stuck out in every direction.
Oh my God.
Then they attached that heavy spiked lump to a wooden stick.
That's not a tool for hunting wallabies.
No, that is a weapon designed for one thing: smashing human skulls. It's a terror weapon. Finding that physically validates the written accounts of the violence. It proves that the brutality wasn't just Pelsert's literary embellishment, it was real, physical, and heavy.
Which brings us to the victims. There have been several excavations, but the work done between 1994 and 2001 seems to be the most significant. They found a mass grave right in the center of the island.
This is a critical site, and the story of its discovery is actually quite frustrating for archaeologists. It was initially disturbed in the 1980s by a fisherman digging a leach drain for his toilet.
I remember you mentioning this, a leach drain, as in for sewage.
Yes. We have to remember that for a long time, the Abrolhos Islands were a center for the rock lobster industry. Fishermen lived there in shacks. They were literally living on top of the graveyard.
Unbelievable.
So a fisherman was digging a trench to let his sewage seep away, and he dug right through a 17th century mass grave.
That is horrifying.
It damaged the site significantly. But in 1994 and 2001, the Western Australian Museum archaeologists went in to salvage the situation. They recovered skeletons designated SK5 through SK12.
And what did they find in that grave?
It was a cross-section of the passengers, 3 adults, 2 youths, and 1 infant.
The infant, SK12.
This is one of the most poignant finds. The coral soil on Beacon Island is highly alkaline, but the surface conditions can be acidic due to guano and vegetation. In this case, the bones of the infant had completely dissolved. They were gone.
So how do they know there was a baby there?
The teeth. Enamel is the hardest substance in the human body. The archaeologists were sifting the sand and found 18 tiny developing teeth. That was all that was left of a life.
That's heartbreaking. 18 teeth in the sand.
It is. It really drives home that no one was spared. Cornelis didn't care about age or innocence. The trauma on the adults in this grave is also telling. SK6, a male in his 20s or 30s, had severe facial trauma. The analysis showed that an upper incisor, a front tooth, had been forced upwards through his jawbone and into his nasal cavity.
The force required to do that, I can't even imagine.
It implies a massive blow to the face with a blunt object, perhaps a musket butt, or maybe that morning star we talked about. It was personal, face-to-face violence.
Did all the skeletons show that kind of trauma?
That's the interesting thing. Most didn't. Many showed no bone trauma at all.
But that doesn't mean they weren't murdered.
Not at all. We know from the journals that people were drowned or had their throats cut. Those methods kill you, but they don't mark the bone. So in this context, a skeleton with no marks is just as suspicious as one with a smashed skull.
One of the adolescents, SK8, had something interesting with them. Buttons.
Yes. SK8 was found with a row of ornate copper alloy buttons running down the chest. When the conservators cleaned them up, they found they were almost identical to buttons made in workshops in Amsterdam in the 1620s.
Wow.
It really places you in that specific moment. This wasn't just a skeleton. It was a kid dressed in his best clothes, maybe hoping for rescue, who ended up in a pit.
Now, in the same grave, there was a forensic mystery that the outline calls the Blob.
Ah, yes. The Blob.
It sounds like a 1950s B-movie, but the archaeologists were genuinely baffled by this, right?
They were. When they were excavating this mass grave, specifically around SK6 and SK7, they found a dense, black, amorphous soil feature encapsulating the bones. It was completely distinct from the surrounding white coral sand.
So initially, the excitement level spikes. Is this preserved tissue? Is this 17th century clothing?
Exactly. The initial theory was that it was decomposed organic matter from 1629. Maybe bedding, maybe the clothes, maybe, and this is the grim thought, human soft tissue that had preserved in some unique chemical reaction.
What do they do?
They didn't want to destroy it, so they cut the whole block of soil out, wrapped it in plaster, and shipped it to the lab for analysis.
And they used some heavy-duty science on it.
They did. They used X-ray diffraction and NMR spectroscopy, nuclear magnetic resonance.
Break that down for us. What is NMR in this context?
Think of it like an MRI for dirt. It allows scientists to look at the chemical structure of organic molecules without destroying the sample. They were looking for the signatures of ancient proteins, cholesterol, things that would indicate 400-year-old human remains.
And what did the MRI for dirt reveal?
It revealed salad.
Salad?
Well, plant lignin, modern plant lignin, and high levels of salinity. It wasn't ancient human remains. It was modern contamination.
From the leach drain.
From the leach drain.
Yeah.
It was essentially kitchen waste and sewage from the 20th century fisherman's shack that had seeped down into the 17th century grave.
That is anticlimactic and really gross.
It is gross.
Yeah.
But archaeologically, it teaches a vital lesson. This is the preservation paradox mentioned in your notes.
Yeah.
Modern human habitation tourism, fishing destroys history. We were literally flushing our waste onto one of the most significant heritage sites in Australia.
And that's why the fishing shacks were eventually removed.
It is. We have to choose between using these islands and saving them.
Wow. Okay, let's move to the more recent work. The shipwrecks of the Roaring Forties project, running from 2014 to 2019. This used even better tech and found even more bodies.
It did. This project raised the total number of individuals found on Beacon Island to 21. And they found some things that really challenge our understanding of the timeline. For example, they found an adolescent designated BLE-11 buried 1.4 meters deep.
Is that deeper than the others?
Much deeper. The mass graves were shallow, hasty, but BLE-11 was deep, careful, respectful. The body was laid out straight, hands positioned.
What does the depth tell you?
It suggests time. It suggests this person died before the terror really took over.
Okay.
Maybe they died of dehydration or illness in the first week or two. When society was still intact, people took the time to dig deep, respectful graves. As the situation devolved into chaos and murder, the graves got shallower, the bodies were just tossed in. You can literally read the collapse of civilization in the depth of the sand.
That's a chilling timeline. And then there is the mystery of Baby 14. This is the one with the animal.
This is truly bizarre. BB-14 was another undisturbed burial. But inside the grave, placed right next to the human, was the skeleton of a juvenile sea lion.
A sea lion, not a dog, not a cat. A wild sea animal.
Carbon dating confirms they are from the same time. This wasn't a later intrusion. Someone buried a sea lion with this person.
Why? Was it food for the afterlife? A pet?
That is the million-dollar question. We know the survivors were eating seals and sea lions to survive, so maybe it was a food offering. But sea lions are wild, aggressive animals. Could it have been a pet? A totem?
It suggests a relationship or a ritual that we just don't have the cultural context to understand. It's a very human mystery.
Speaking of mysteries, let's talk about the musket ball theory. We mentioned musket balls as ammo earlier, but they found them in places that didn't make sense for a shooting.
Right. They found lead musket balls associated with skeletons, specifically near the chest area. But there were no broken ribs, no ballistic trauma. They hadn't been shot.
So why is a musket ball sitting in their chest cavity? The leading theory, backed by historical medical practices of the time, is that they swallowed it. Or rather, they were sucking on it.
Sucking on lead bullets.
It sounds crazy to us now because we know about lead poisoning. But in the 17th century, it was a common soldier's trick. They believed that chewing or sucking on a piece of lead would stimulate saliva flow and reduce the agonizing pangs of thirst.
So these people were dying of thirst, sucking on bullets to trick their bodies into making spit, and then they died with the bullet in their mouth or throat.
Exactly. It paints such a desperate picture. You can imagine them lying in the sand, lips cracked, tongues swollen, sucking on a toxic piece of lead just to feel a moment of relief. It's a level of desperation that is hard to comprehend.
And science has also told us more about who these people were, not just how they died, but where they came from.
Yes. This is where isotopic analysis comes in, strontium and oxygen isotopes.
Okay, break that down. How does a tooth tell you someone's nationality?
It's all about the water you drink as a child. Strontium is an element found in rocks. As groundwater flows through those rocks, it picks up a specific strontium signature based on the local geology.
What?
When you drink that water or eat plants grown in that soil as a child, that strontium signature gets locked into your tooth enamel as it forms. It never changes.
So your teeth are basically a geological GPS log of your childhood.
Exactly. It's a geological passport. When they analyzed the teeth of the Batavia victims, they found something surprising. They weren't all Dutch.
I just assumed they were. It was a Dutch ship.
It was a Dutch ship, but the VOC was a massive international employer. The analysis showed signatures from Scandinavia, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany.
So it was a melting pot.
It really was. It highlights that this wasn't just a Dutch tragedy, it was a European one. You had a German soldier, a French sailor, and a Dutch merchant all dying together on a reef in Australia. The VOC was pulling labor from all over the continent.
Okay, so far we've painted a picture of absolute horror on Beacon Island. Cornelis is in charge, people are being murdered, society has collapsed. But we need to switch gears. Because while this nightmare was happening on Beacon Island, something completely different was happening on a nearby island.
The resistance.
This is the B-plot that saves the day.
It really is. And it's my favorite part of the story because it's such a perfect counterpoint to the horror.
Enter Wiebe Hayes.
Wiebe Hayes was a soldier, a common soldier, not an officer. Early on, Cornelis, who knew there were soldiers on board and saw them as a threat, decided to get rid of them. He told Hayes and about 20 other soldiers to go to High Island, now known as West Wallaby Island, to look for water.
But that was a lie, right? Cornelis didn't think there was water there?
It was a death sentence. He was sending them there to die. He confiscated their weapons, gave them no supplies, and told them to light a fire if they found water. He fully expected them to dehydrate and perish within a week. But West Wallaby Island is different from Beacon Island. It's larger, and it has natural limestone cisterns. They found water.
They found it.
Fresh, drinkable water. And they found food. Those Timor wallabies we talked about earlier, they were plentiful there.
So while the mutineers on Beacon Island are going insane from thirst and desperation, the soldiers on West Wallaby are having a barbecue.
Essentially, yes. They were eating well and drinking fresh water. They grew strong. And eventually, they signaled Cornelis with a smoke signal, just like he asked.
Cornelis must have been terrified.
He was. He realized he had a problem. He had a strong, organized group of soldiers right next door. He had to kill them before the rescue ship arrived.
Right.
But Weeby Hayes wasn't just lucky. He was smart. When survivors escaping the massacre on Beacon Island managed to float over to West Wallaby on rafts, they told Hayes what was happening. Hayes organized his men. He knew an attack was coming, so he built a fort.
A fort on a deserted island.
Weeby Hayes Fort. It is still there today. You can stand in it. It is the oldest European structure in Australia.
What's it like?
It's simple flat limestone slabs stacked up to make walls, but it was effective defensive engineering.
But they didn't have guns. Cornelis had the guns.
True, but the soldiers had discipline, and they improvised. Archaeologists found evidence of their weaponry. They found pieces of hoop iron from floating barrels that had been sharpened and fastened to sticks to make pikes.
So you have a well-fed, disciplined unit of pikemen defending a stone fort against a group of desperate, starving, undisciplined mutineers with muskets.
And the discipline won. The mutineers attacked several times. The soldiers held them off. They used the terrain. They used their pikes. It's an incredible underdog story.
And the standoff leads to the climax. Pelsert finally returns on the rescue ship, the Sardem.
He does, and it turned into a literal race. Both the mutineers and Weeby Hayes' men spotted the sail on the horizon. They both jumped into their little boats and rowed as hard as they could to reach Pelsert first.
And if the mutineers get there first?
They board and kill everyone. If Hayes gets there first, he can warn Pelsert.
And Hayes won.
Hayes won the race. He reached the Sardam, yelled out the warning. Pelsert trained the ship's cannons on the mutineers' boat. It was over.
And then comes the retribution. And this part of the archaeology is just as grim as the massacre. Long Island.
Also known as Seals Island. This is where Pelsert set up his court. He didn't want to haul these dangerous men all the way back to Jakarta. He conducted the trial right there on the coral.
And the execution site has been found?
It has. On Long Island, on a rise in the land, archaeologists found iron fastenings and bolts. Chemical analysis dates them to pre-1840. It fits the description of the gallows Pelsert erected.
The punishments were severe.
They were brutal. Cornelis and the ringleaders had their right hands cut off before they were hanged.
Why the hand?
It was symbolic. The right hand is the hand you raise to swear an oath of loyalty. By cutting it off, they were stripping away the oath they had broken. Then they were hanged. Others were keel-hauled dragged under the barnacle-encrusted hull of the ship, or flogged.
But 2 men were spared death. Wouter Loos and Jan Pelgrim.
Spared is a relative term. They were marooned. Pelsert gave them a small boat and some supplies, and left them on the mainland of Australia, near the Murchison River.
Why?
He had instructions to leave men there to see if they could make contact with the indigenous people.
So technically, these 2 mutineers became the first European settlers in Australia.
Technically, yes. Though settler implies they stayed. We have no idea what happened to them. They walked into the Australian bush in 1629 and vanished from history.
An amazing loose end.
Did they survive? Did they join an Aboriginal group? We just don't know.
It's incredible. So bringing this all together, we have massacres, forensic mysteries, forts, and executions. Why does this matter? Why are we still digging this up 400 years later?
I think it comes back to that preservation paradox we touched on. This site is terrible for preservation. It's loose coral, it's acidic, and it's full of burrowing birds called shearwaters that dig tunnels and mix up the bones.
The birds are disturbing the crime scene.
Constantly. Yet despite that, it offers unique insights. It is what we call the archaeology of crisis. Usually, archaeology looks at long periods of stability, how people lived in a village for 200 years. This site captures a specific moment of total collapse. It shows us how humans behave when the rules disappear.
It validates the history, too. Pelsert's journal could have been dismissed as just, a crazy story.
Exactly. The skeletons provide the physical proof, the smashed teeth, the location of the bodies. It corroborates the horror story. But the absence of trauma on some bodies also validates the accounts of drowning and poisoning. It proves the journal wasn't just a sales pitch.
And it's a site of so many firsts.
Huge firsts for Australia. First European habitation. First legal execution. First documented encounter with marsupials. It completely changes the timeline of Australian history. We were obsessed with Captain Cook in 1770, but this was 1629. There was a European fort, a European court of law, and a European battle happening in Australia, while the English were still struggling to set up colonies in America.
It really shifts the center of gravity of our history.
It does. And I want to leave you with a provocative thought. We have found 21 individuals on Beacon Island, but over 100 people were murdered.
So the math says there are still about 80 bodies out there.
Roughly 80 bodies are still lying under the sand on Beacon Island. Maybe under the shrubbery, maybe where tourists used to walk. As technology improves, better DNA analysis, better ground-penetrating radar, what else will we learn? We might be able to identify them by name, connect them to families in Europe today. These aren't just characters in a story. They are specific individuals who traveled halfway across the world to die in a nightmare.
That is a heavy thought. The story isn't over. The sand is still holding secrets.
It is. And it reminds us that history isn't just words on a page. It's physical evidence waiting to be read.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. It's a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful places hide the darkest secrets. And that sometimes, to find the truth, you have to dig a little deeper. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Keep asking questions.